Okay, welcome to the Costa Mesa City Council.
Mayor, just 1 minute, please.
Okay.
Okay. Give me 5 seconds.
Okay. Mayor, you may now proceed.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the Costa Mesa City Council study session for Tuesday, October 13th, 2020. At this time, we will call the meeting to order, and Councilmember Marr, would you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. If everyone please stand, it's the awkward part. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. And at this time, we'll have the roll call by voice vote. Ms. Green? Not voice vote, voice call, sorry.
Councilmember Chavez,
Here.
Councilmember Guinness, is absent. Councilmember Mansour,
Here.
Councilmember Marr,
Here.
Councilmember Reynolds,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens,
Yes, I'm here.
and Mayor Foley.
Present. Okay, we have one study session item tonight, and Ms. Green?
Thank you. The study session item is City Council direction regarding short-term rentals. Staff presentation by Ms. Lee, Community Development Director.
Okay, and tonight how we will proceed is that we'll have the presentation by our city staff, and then we will have a presentation from a neighborhood group, and then we will take questions after that, okay? Ms. Lee?
Thank you very much, Mayor and council members. This evening, staff will be presenting some high-level information outlining issues and opportunities related to short-term rentals. We'll be looking for council direction and feedback this evening as to some of the various options that we'll be presenting. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Minu Ashabi, our principal planner, for a formal presentation.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I will start sharing my screen. So short-term vacation rentals are generally defined as any residence rented for a period that's less than 30 consecutive days. These rental units are generally advertised on common marketplaces for short-term rentals, such as Airbnb, Home Away from Home, Booking.com, and also some smaller marketplaces that are focused on the specific tourist destinations or by individuals. Short-term rentals are not contained or defined in the zoning code. As such, there are no specific regulations that are governing short-term rentals in Costa Mesa currently. Code enforcement staff responds to violations of the municipal code. The police department responds to calls for service related to violations of curfew, noise ordinance, and other municipal violations. In the past several months, the city has experienced an increase in the number of the complaints related to these rental units, and complaints have been limited to a small number of properties. As such, it doesn't seem to be widespread in the city, but it's also a concern to some specific neighborhoods. The increase in the level of complaints could be temporary, and the spike in the use of short-term rentals could be a way of business due to COVID-19 conditions, but also it could also reflect an increase in this trend and having an option for the homeowners to have supplemental income. On one online platform that we searched, there were 100 listings in Costa Mesa, and they vary from individual rooms to guest rooms to entire apartments and entire homes. The more bedrooms you search for, the numbers drop. So the majority are bedroom rentals versus rental of entire homes. The concentration seems to be in larger homes when it gets on the east side, and also closer to popular destinations such as the Lab, South Coast Plaza, 17th Street Commercial Corridor, and the beach. And the listing for the individual rooms vary from $50 to $150 per night. And then if the entire home is rented, sometimes they can go as high as $500 a night. So to provide this information, we did some research of Orange County cities and how they've been handling short-term rentals. For example, in Anaheim, this use was prohibited in 2016. In 2019, the city council revisited the prohibition and allowed a number of operators to continue operating. Currently, they have 198 single-family homes that are permitted for this use and 79 condominiums. In San Clemente, this use is not permitted in single family districts. It's allowed in multiple family and mixed use districts. And there's also a separation of 300 foot between the operators. Newport Beach has a high number of them, up to 1,500, and those uses are currently prohibited in single family districts. They're allowed in multiple family districts. The city of Newport Beach also did a comprehensive redo of the ordinance in 2020, and some provision related to the number of nights that a unit could be rented out, age restriction, and also they also established a complaint hotline that's available 24/7, and residents can call the number, and then someone at the property would need to respond within 30 minutes. Huntington Beach currently prohibits this use. However, they did a resident survey in 2020 to kind of gauge whether or not there's support in the community. The results of that survey has not been published, so I don't have information on that, but as far as having the fine is $1,000 per violation. Irvine prohibits the use. They've recently hired a consultant to investigate the illegal operators, and the fines range from $100 to $500 per day. Laguna Beach prohibits this in residential zones, and they are only allowed in commercial zones. They have a limited number of operators, and they have 55 applications that are in process. City of Laguna Niguel prohibits this use. City of Dana Point allows it on limited basis. They have about 150 operators. City of Dana Point also did a survey of the residents in 2018, and that result was published. It seemed that 72% of the respondents supported this type of use as long as it was host occupied and not in single family districts. We also checked a few jurisdictions outside Orange County that have recent regulations. City of Pasadena allows vacation rentals only when there's a host on site and when the property owner resides at the property for 9 months out of the year. City of Santa Monica only allows short-term rentals in form of a home sharing, and home sharing is basically applied to, again, properties that have a host on site. There are some properties that have been in operation since before 2017, and those were amortized into the program. The maximum number of occupancy is 10 or 2 person per bedroom, and then they also have a $1,000 fine per violation. City of Long Beach has the most recent regulations that was adopted in 2020. And that's also a host-based kind of a program, and the violators are subject to a $1,000 fine per violation. In terms of policy and the options available, the City Council could choose to prohibit short-term rentals and establish enforcement regulations, address staff resources to effectively monitor and ensure compliance. The city can also choose to establish a regulations and permitting system that would allow rentals within certain residential districts or commercial mixed-use districts, allow rentals of standalone housing or host or owner residence or primary residence units. The city can also allow rental of a portion or something similar to City of Santa Monica, such as a home sharing program. To establish these regulations, the City Council could also consider requiring a minimum distance between the operators, limiting short-term rentals to one per property owner, limit the number of months per year that the property could be operating, establish a minimum number of nights for each rental, establish a limit on the number of guests per visit, limit the number of vehicles that would be allowed on the property, establish a minimum age for the renters, or any combination of these options. As I indicated, some cities have chosen to do resident surveys, and 2 of those cities are in Orange County. The city council may also elect to conduct a public survey to assess the interest in this type of regulations. In terms of enforcement, complaints have been primarily associated with disruptive properties in terms of noise, parking, trash, disturbing the peace at certain locations. And the existing enforcement tools that are available are basing a violation of zoning code and Title 20 and police department in terms of criminal citations and disturbing the peace. If the city council were to move forward with active regulations, the staff would conduct additional due diligence that would be needed to evaluate and codify other enforcement options, such as establishing a fine or a penalty. Just to have an understanding of how this could be applied to residential uses, the city has approximately 42,000 housing units. Of those, approximately 14,000 are single-family residences and 28,000 are multifamily, which includes apartments and condominiums. Allowing for short-term rentals would allow homeowners to obtain supplemental income, but it could also remove housing stock from the market for long-term residents. It could also fill a market demand for short-term stays, so it would be an alternative to hotel stays. In terms of transient occupancy tax, the rates through the county range from 8 to 15%. The Costa Mesa rate is 8%. If the short-term rentals are permitted, they would be subject to transit occupancy tax based on Title 16, and additional due diligence would be necessary to determine potential revenues and cost of the collection. Adoption of the short-term rental could increase the city revenue by 8%. Based on preliminary review, there are already about at least 100 short-term rentals that are operating in this city, and they're not submitting the TOT tax. These revenues could offset additional administrative costs for implementing and monitoring and managing a program that gets adopted. Should the council direct staff to pursue a short-term rental ordinance, the staff will initiate the process of providing revenue projections and estimated administrative and fiscal impacts. The new program would include permitting, inspection of the units, tax assessment, collection, auditing the tax collection, and the program oversight and enforcement. A new program would require additional staff resources and funding, including staff for finance, development services, police, and fire department. This process could also initiate, business licensing for each of the operators, tax collections and audits, permitting, annual monitoring, renewals, inspection of the units, compliance, enforcement, and handling calls for service. There are also several third-party consultants that the city could consider retaining to track permitting and compliance and renewals. There are companies that also issue like citations. So depending on what direction the city council chooses to move forward, staff would conduct additional due diligence on the specific cost and staff resources that would be necessary to implement this new program. In summary, staff is seeking council feedback and direction for any protocol in terms of management of short-term rentals within Costa Mesa. The purpose of this study session was to just discuss it at high level, introduce and gauge the opportunities, and depending on the direction that we receive from the city council, we can return with more details and options. That concludes my presentation, and we are available for questions.
Okay, at this time, we will have the presentation from the community and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one representative from the community that is going to be speaking on behalf of a group. And so here we go. Patty, we are allowing you to speak, and then we're going to share your PowerPoint.
Well, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to share with this, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. This was prepared by one of the residents in our neighborhood of Mesa Woods. You can go to the next slide. As you can see, I'm sure most of you know where we are. We're Mesa Woods right here by South Coast Plaza, which is one of the destinations that was mentioned in the city's presentation as a area that the short-term rentals are desired to come to. Next location. And we're here making this because of what's happened in our neighborhood. So this house, which I live on a different street, but very close to it, was sold in August, and they began upgrading. We were really excited about some new neighbors coming in, and we thought they were moving in, and then we realized that it was going to be a short-term rental. We can go on. Calling it Party Central. The next two slides are just some of the dates and some of the instances of what has happened. We've literally had continuous parties every weekend. They last for days. I went out at 4 o'clock in the morning to let my dog out, and they were still out, still partying. As homeowners, we really didn't know what we could or couldn't do until we had a meeting with a city council member and the police department and understood what our rights were. But again, this is a very quiet, elderly and young family neighborhood. And then this last weekend was probably the worst weekend with the, I can't even tell you how many people were at this house, but they were bringing in chairs and chairs and chairs for them to party at. And this was probably the worst weekend we had since the beginning. 40 cars, loud, yep. Go on. So this is like the first couple weekends of how people are just parking all over the street, and it's hard to get in and out of driveways sometimes, and very loud cars also, and car alarms going off at all hours of the night. more car parking, another one. This is someone's Ring video, and someone is relieving themselves in front of a neighbor's house that is right next door to this house. People walk out all times of the night, have conversations out in front of the houses. People that have the Ring, they're constantly going off, monitoring people coming by their homes, and it's like an invasion. This is one of the bedrooms, as you can see. This is for 6 people in a bedroom. So the idea of limiting the number of guests in a house really appeals to myself personally, and I think some of the other homeowners. They're just trying to get in as many people as they can. They did have a big party and let us know about it. Again, the police were called very early that evening because it just got out of hand. So as a homeowner, you know, we'd like you to take some of these into consideration when you're coming up with these new rentals. The homeowners around here, there are 3 houses that their backyard directly backs up to this house, and they get it the worst. The people on the street get it the worst. I get it, but not so bad. But we all dread the weekends. None of us are enjoying our homes. One of the homeowners wants to sell her house because she is just so fed up with the rudeness and the excessive noise, and just it's not a neighborhood anymore. And that's what this is. We are a community. We do know each other. We all say hi to each other. We know what's going on in each other's lives. And then this gets thrown in, and it's caused havoc on our neighborhood. And we would like some regulations to help prevent this from happening furthermore at this house and at other houses in our community. Again, we know it's happening all over, and I think he just lists some cities here on the next couple slides. This was his, what they looked up. Go ahead. So some of the residents came together and said, you know, to define what is a short-term rental, no one-night rental, so seem to be the party ones, that they have to specifically say that there are no parties allowed, and that somehow to make the owner financially responsible for the place being called out or not in code. I think that's some of the things you guys are looking at here, which I think is, if you get to an owner's pocket, you're going to make them sit up and notice. Because I do think there are some responsible short-term rental owners out there, and we just need to kind of get everyone else in line. You really need to think about what zoning you want it to be allowed in, and don't grandfather anyone in. This is all so new. And again, limiting the number of people per the number of bedrooms. One city's ordinance that I read 2 people per bedroom plus 2. So is that 4 people per bedroom? Or if it's a 3-bedroom house, is that 3 times 6 plus 2 would be 8 is the max? So think about how you're writing it, how it can be interpreted for the max number of people, if that's something that you guys are going to consider. And then the idea of having them have a permit and go through the home being looked at, I think are some great ideas. And a hotline would be a very good. Airbnb and Vrbo have hotlines for neighbors, and I know we have all used it, and that is how this particular homeowner is not allowed to list his house on Airbnb anymore due to the number of complaints received by neighbors. They don't want to have that as part of their image. Wanted to thank you for being able to present this to City Council and take into consideration some of the points that we brought up. I think you've got some great points that you guys are looking at, and I know we are all available for questions from anyone from City Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jasinski. That was excellent presentation. Really summarized well some of the issues that you've been dealing with and what we learned a little bit out there at the community meeting. So with that, what I'll do at this time is I'll open it up for questions from the public first, and then we'll take questions from council. So.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to speak on this matter, please raise your hand. Or if you are on the telephone, press *9. And we'll begin with the individual whose phone number ends in 931. And press *6 to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Foley and council members. My name is Catherine Levasseur. I am a resident of Huntington Beach. I have no business ties in Costa Mesa. I know of no other short-term rental stakeholders in Costa Mesa. I learned of this meeting through a push notification from the city of Costa Mesa that I signed up for well over a year ago for meetings pertaining to short-term rentals. As a senior, I rely on my short-term rental income in order to remain in my home, as well as to maintain my home and to pay for my property taxes. I am also the leader of Huntington Beach Short-Term Rental Alliance and am speaking to you today on behalf of our group members. We stand in support of taxed and regulated short-term rentals in Costa Mesa, as we are for our city of Huntington Beach. We ask this council to consider establishing city policies related to short-term rentals and adopting a permitting and regulation program. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. Okay. That was a good example of how our push notifications are working. So let's see. Next speaker is phone number ending in 174.
Hi, this is Jonah Breslau and Francis Engler from Unite Here, Local 11. I'm Jonah from Lane. I think Francis from Unite Here would be best to get us started. Francis, you there?
Hi, thank you, members of the council, for holding this session on this important topic and for hearing from us. We are here today to advocate that the city of Costa Mesa institute a ban on short-term rentals, and that they begin implementing all three of the effective enforcement mechanisms that have been explored and tested by other cities, including platform accountability and an effective data collection system for local enforcement, as well as private right of action. The reason for this is because our members are in a profound housing crisis, and there is just simply no doubt that short-term rentals, if allowed to eat up the housing stock, have a negative effect on the availability of housing, especially on the availability of affordable housing. Finally, we would note that the experience of the city of Anaheim shows why it is so important to begin with a ban on short-term rentals and to effectively enforce that ban and show that the mechanisms of enforcement are in place before there's any consideration of future permitting of some form of home sharing, because once you begin legalizing short-term rentals, it becomes very difficult to put the genie back in the bottle, as was shown in the experience of Anaheim. And so we hope that with that information, we can do everything we can to support the city in taking an effective stand against the damage that short-term rentals do to housing.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just add, this is Jonah Breslau from Lane, the Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy, and we are a advocacy and think tank organization in Los Angeles emphasizing sustainable economic development and creating an economy that works for all Californians. And as you've already heard tonight, short-term rentals have negatively impacted the regional housing crisis, neighborhood character, and created challenges for city code enforcement. And so in this time of crisis, it is especially important that we protect housing for working families. Allowing short-term rentals risks damaging the production and provision of long-term housing, as investors find it more profitable to cater to tourists than to long-term tenants. Replacing these lost units to short-term rentals is extremely expensive and challenging for municipalities. Costa Mesa has taken a great deal of leadership on issues of housing and homelessness. The best strategy to tackle the impacts of short-term rentals is to prohibit them. This creates a bright line rule for enforcement staff and does the maximal amount to protect housing during this crisis. Moreover, we urge you to protect units in commercial and mixed-use zones as well. Mixed-use developments are key to providing affordable housing, and we urge you to ensure that all neighborhoods, not just residential zones, have renters and homeowners as a priority. So please stand up for housing and prohibit short-term rentals. And I know also there were some members of Unite Here Local 11 who'd love to speak, and they need translation. So I would like to be able to call them back into the meeting and provide that translation for them if that's possible.
Okay, Ms. Farrell Harrison, we usually have somebody who can translate. Is that available for us tonight?
Madam Mayor, yes, we do have somebody that can translate here tonight if needed. If that individuals could let us know when it's their turn to speak. Are they on the same line or are they on a different line?
I have to merge them back in. So let me work on that. Would it be all right to come back to me and then I'll have them all set to go?
Sure. Why don't we do this? We'll take the speakers that are in line
Thanks,
and then you can come back in at the end and we'll go through those who need Spanish speaking translation. Does that work?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Okay, next speaker is Burr, B-U-R-R. Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity to speak. The homeowner that shared the PowerPoint on the effect that this has had on their neighborhood is similar to what we're experiencing in our neighborhood, a quiet street, residential neighborhood where everybody knows each other. The short-term rental came in and what we're experiencing is frequent parties going to all hours of the night. I believe it was May, we had a shooting here. People drove by and shot at the party, and party goers returned shots, resulting in a couple bullets coming through our bedroom and one into our garage. Despite frequent complaints to the homeowner, they have not made any changes into how they're managing their home. They frequently rent it out for a single night, and we never know what we're going to get. Occasionally there'll be a quiet night, but frequently we have parties going all night with strange people driving in at all hours of the night, going to early morning hours. Oftentimes we can't get them to quiet down, and so we'll call the police to have the police deal with it. But it has completely upset the neighborhood. We have another one that's just opened up on our street as well. So this is just a 1 block long residential area with 2 of these short-term rentals. And we would like to see a ban on short-term rentals. And if not a ban, strict code enforcement in which the homeowners and the people renting are accountable to some rules that can keep this neighborhood safe and quiet.
Mr. Burr, thank you. I'm assuming it's Mr. Burr. If I'm mistaken, I apologize. Could you tell us what neighborhood you're referring to? I think I know, but.
Yes, we're on Town Street.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And
okay.
The residence I'm talking about is 834 Town Street.
Okay, thank you so much. And thanks for joining us and giving us your input tonight. Appreciate it. Okay, next speaker is Galaxy Tab A.
Hi, this is Daryl. I'm at 840 Town Street. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yep, so another Town Street resident. Just a couple of things to mention. So the one issue is there's really no accountability by the website or anybody else in the activity. So you already heard about the shooting, the parties. What's kind of what says a lot is that Airbnb was notified that there was a shooting. They actually took it down off their website like immediately. It ended up going on to VRBO. VRBO was notified that there were parties in the shooting. Well, they actually they made it look like it was taken off, but actually it was posted to look like it's at a different location. So they took the existing photos of the pool, the backyard, but now it's on East Costa Mesa. And so now we have people showing up who are like, yeah, we don't really know if we're in the right place because it's the wrong, but all that to say, like, for all the PR that Airbnb and VRBO do to act like they're being good neighbors and they're cracking down on party houses and all the things that they're trying to do that, they're not doing anything because, again, the house is back on Airbnb with the same exact management, person. And another issue that doesn't really get discussed that much is, so what we learned from when our neighbor moved out, and basically our neighbor who owns the house where the shooting happened, family lived there, very close, like good people, moved to Huntington Beach, and they were going to try to rent out the house to a family. Well, after a little bit of trying to do that, they got approached by this subleasing company, and they were offered $1,000 more than they were asking to rent this house out. And they were told that it was going to be like corporate housing for Google executives or something like that. But there was like a subclause that said, well, if we aren't able to do that for some reason, then it's going to be on Airbnb and VRBO. So it's kind of a bait and switch scenario. And we see other houses where the same person is the host that hosts the house next door. And so we're pretty sure that it's basically an industry has spawned up of subleasing people to, offer more money than the market will bear to rent out a house that would otherwise be used to house a family. But now that you're being offered so much money and you're making an extra $1,000 a month, it's really hard to, frankly care when, the neighborhood goes downhill. So the extra rental income incentivizes the property owners to ignore their neighbors' problems. And it's one less place for people to live in Costa Mesa. And it's like, it doesn't, and like the planning commission person said, like, it's not widespread, but the fact that it's so profitable, the demand is so great because Huntington Beach has banned it. We're kind of the only show in town, that this is, going to end up being more of a problem because it's extremely lucrative, and people want to live in these places. And I'd also add when you calculate the transient occupancy tax calculation, you based it on the assumption that the rentals that are being rented out in Costa Mesa houses are not displacing what would otherwise be hotel revenue. So if people were going to stay in a motel and they decide to stay, in a house, like, that's not new income. That's a transfer of income.
Excuse me, your 3 minutes are completed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, our next speaker is Christine Huxford.
She wanted to just finish.
Hi, thank you for having this meeting. I am also on Town Street. So we have dealt with the nonstop parties. So I want to say thank you to Patty for her presentation, because that is certainly something that we have been dealing with here. We've dealt with the drive-by shooting. As Daryl said, this is a secondary party that is actually running this as a property management that has not been good to work with at all. And we actually had no idea that this was even going to be a short-term rental until all the parties started, and then really actually found out for sure the night of the shooting. And we did not have any contact information for the person who's the property manager until that night. We have actually reached out to him before because they had dogs on the property that were rebounding off of our fence, and he didn't even respond. I have tried to talk to him before about the fact that we're still having issues, and the response I get is, what, people can't talk. So there's been no trying to work with us. And this is basically being run as a hotel. It is a business. And I cannot stress that enough. There is a check-in time, a checkout time. They do finally, after the shooting, have actually maid service, because for the first few months they didn't. They have a house rules, and it says on their website, no parties, all of that stuff. But there's no staff and there's no security that is going to be able to enforce that. So on average, we probably, call the police at least twice a month. Whereas before this happened, we didn't. So, we have a concern for our safety. We have a concern for our neighborhood because it is a very quiet street. And this has ruined that. And, unless you hear kids over there, everybody kind of goes on edge of like, well, what's going to happen tonight? And, noticing that, a lot of us have a harder time sleeping. There have been times where there have been kids there, and then we've still called the police because the parents are up, and the amount of pot smoking that goes on over there is mind blowing. Our house reeks of it, and I get it's legal. So there's a lot of these things that are happening over here, and there's nothing for us to do, and we've just had to deal with it. So I am all for banning short-term rentals. And, if there are regulations, I have serious concerns as to whether or not those can actually be enforced. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Huxford. Appreciate your input and your comments. And if you stay on, I'm going to ask the Captain Bacala later to give us an update on what residents can do now to address these impacts even before we have any other kind of regulation, because tonight's just a study session. So we're not able to vote on anything tonight. We're here to learn, get feedback, and then give some information and feedback back to staff to bring something forward. But I want to make sure that we share with the residents what exactly you can do now to address this. Okay, next speaker is Visalia Drive.
Hi, my name is Alexandra, and I am the fiance of the homeowner. He cannot be on this call tonight because he is working, and we were just notified of this meeting. But I wanted to reply to the Patty's presentation. Majority of that information is correct. I would not say all of it is accurate. We do have a bunk bed room for 6. Those bunk beds are made for children, and it says on there that there's a weight capacity that is for children. So that is not used for adults. That house is partially occupied by the homeowner, which is my fiance, 65% of the time. I did send in a presentation, but I did send it in last minute. So I believe the council members have a copy of it that I hope you look at. There are actual pictures with timestamps. There are copies of the police reports or when the cops are called out to the property and other properties in the neighborhood. I only want to talk about facts here. I don't like to talk about things that I do not know. And I think Patty's presentation was a lot of things that were not facts. In the picture, she mentions, 40 cars, but the picture only represents 7. So things like that, I just want to make sure only facts are given to you guys when you make your decision. Peter is the homeowner, and he is a new short-term rental. This is his first time, and it is a learning curve, I think, for all short-term rental owners. Peter did contact the city prior to opening this and putting it on Airbnb and Vrbo. And we were told that Costa Mesa does not have any policies or regulations. So it was up to us to do our own research on how to handle it, what rules to put. In the beginning, there were no rules as to parties or loud noise. We did not know that would be an issue. As soon as it was brought to our attention, we definitely updated the ad. So if you look at it online, it says no noise, no parties, only who is booked for the house should be in the house. We were alerted that there were multiple cars there this weekend, and Peter and myself did go by. We met with the cops and we talked about what's the best way to address the situation. The cops went to the house and they told the people they need to move the cars because they were blocking the sidewalk and that there was a noise complaint. The renters did move all of the cars so that no sidewalk was being blocked. The cops said, they did look like they were complying. So we asked the cops, should we remove them from the property since there was a noise complaint? And as a group decision, we decided not to, since they looked like they were going to comply. So Peter and I are definitely want to work with the police, want to work with the city, and we definitely want to keep the neighborhood safe. We just need to know policies and procedures. And like I said, it's a learning curve. And ever since we did update the ad to say no noise and no parties, the number of complaints have decreased drastically. So if you look at the city of Costa Mesa on the website that says where the complaints are happening, if you notice in the last 14 days, we've only had 2 noise complaints. Last month, I believe there were more than 6 or 8. I can't go back more than 14 days on the website, but that's what I'm seeing now on the website today. Moving forward, we like to continue the rental as long as we can make sure the neighborhood and everyone's safety is our main concern. And we want to abide by the rules that, Airbnb and Vrbo has told us that we should abide by, which is the no noise and no parties. And I heard about the town situation street, and that is very alarming to me. So, all of this information is very helpful, things that we can do better, things that we can make sure who we're renting to. There's different descriptions you could put on what kind of renters you're looking for. And I think managing that better would help everybody. I don't know about the people on Town Street, but I know for us, we can always just allow people that have kids that are renting or families. And I think during COVID, a lot of people are using these houses as rentals for family gatherings because they can't go to a hotel and they have nowhere else to go. Your little small family can't go out to Disneyland anymore, but maybe they can go to a home with a pool and enjoy themselves in the backyard. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Ms. Green, I'm going to have to rely on you to let the speakers know at 2 minutes when their time has expired. Next speaker is Governor Street.
Hi, I live also in a residential neighborhood in Westside Costa Mesa. I live right next door to an Airbnb. We had actually previously spoken to Manuel Chavez about this certain house. It's been difficult because my parents own this home, and living next to this house, in my early 20s, I'm a frequent user of Airbnb and Vrbo. I love it. However, I do respect my neighbors and I do respect other people's neighbors. And what we've been experiencing is nothing close to respect. There's always parties, even how other people have said already. The children, it doesn't mean anything. Parents are partying, they're having a great time, and I totally understand that. However, it's Monday through Thursday, and we have people yelling and screaming and partying. Furthermore, to talk about like the shooting, every night is like a hit or miss, and it really worries me that one day there will be a shooting. We've already had 2 huge fights go down, and I've had to call like the cops and tell them, there's women screaming and kids crying because 2 of their, partners are fighting. And, all respect to Costa Mesa PD, but every time we've called, it's been really difficult to have them do anything. And I understand because you show up to a house and the person at the house is respectful and says, we will respect your noise complaint. The second the cops leave, the people are doing it all over again, and it's just as bad. And so we're up till 6 a.m. I work at 6 a.m. I go to school full time. This is from someone who is young and actually likes Airbnb, and this is not the way Airbnb should be. And if there could at least be violations to the homeowner, in the sense of if there are any noise complaints, there should be more stricter violations. I've had contact with the homeowner and she's very polite, great, but made no difference. And every time that
Excuse me, your 2 minutes are complete.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you taking time to give us your feedback. Okay, next speaker, we're going to skip 174. We're going to go to the next speaker, and then we'll get back to 174. Next speaker is 300.
300 does not have their hand raised, Madam Mayor.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Is this our last speaker then?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and Ms. Gonzalez is here to do translations. So 1 minute, please. If 174, you could press *6 to unmute yourself.
Are you there?
Bueno, Paula, ¿está?
Sí. Hola, buenas tardes.
Paula.
Sí, si quiere
Hola, buenas tardes. Si quiere hablar y parar después de cada oración y así yo puedo traducir su oración.
Ok, ok.
Ok, si quiere comenzar.
Sí. Hola, mi nombre es Paola Lima.
¿Cuál es su nombre, perdón?
Es Paola Lima.
Ok. Hi, my name is Paula Lima.
Estoy trabajando en Balboa Bay Club.
I'm working at Balboa Bay Club.
He vivido en Costa Mesa por más de 20 años.
I've lived in Costa Mesa for more than 20 years.
Desafortunadamente, he perdido muchas horas de trabajo por la crisis de COVID.
Unfortunately, I've lost a lot of hours of employment due to COVID.
En este momento difícil.
In this difficult time.
Alquileres a corto plazo perjudican a familias.
Short-term rentals, harm. Perdón, ¿qué es lo que dijo el último?
Perjudican a
Sí.
familias.
They harm families.
Como la mía, mientras luchamos.
They harm families like mine that, sí.
Por encontrar una vivienda, luchamos por encontrar una vivienda.
We fight to find a housing.
Por favor, prohibir los alquileres de corto plazo.
Please ban short-term rentals.
Okay, thank you. Gracias. Was there any other speakers in 174?
Un ratito, okay, we need to do instructions. One moment. Thanks so much for your recommendation.
¿Hay otra persona que va a hablar?
Okay, we're going to move on to the next speaker unless there's somebody else on the line.
Thank you. We have one more speaker, Lance Hallstone.
Okay, hello. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I live on El Camino Drive, and we do have a short-term rental up the street, three houses from me, and they were wonderful neighbors when they lived there, raised their kids. Then they got into this Airbnb business, and they are fantastic people, but sometimes they don't always rent to fantastic people. And we can hear the noise from their backyard in our backyard, and it's gone on long past 11 o'clock at night during the week, and sometimes on the weekends past midnight. We have called and have not seen any response. I can't imagine what the people who lives on the cul-de-sac behind them have to deal with. And we do get the drift of herbs drifting down our way occasionally if the wind is right. And I believe in Airbnbs. I've stayed in them, but they have to have rules. And we do count on our wonderful police force to enforce them. And I know that one day as I was walking and everybody was outside posing for a picture in the front yard, there were 16 people. That is way too many people in one house.
It sleeps 10.
And it sleeps 10. And I know that, they bring a lot of cars, and I hope that helps Costa Mesa revenue, because every Monday morning when we get our street swept, I see tickets on those cars. But, I just think the people who own it were great neighbors, but I don't think the renters are, and they don't care, most of them.
They aren't always bad.
They aren't always bad. I mean, but the place is advertised as a surfer's house. And
Advertises the perfect house. That's the name of it.
Yeah, the perfect house for surfers. But and they can be a rowdy bunch. I was one too one time. But
Thank you. It has been 2 minutes.
okay, my letter that I have from you guys says 3 minutes, but I think I made my point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have, it looks like one more speaker in 174. Or do you have another speaker who you need translation services for? Can you press *6 on your phone?
Buenas tardes, ¿hay alguien ahí que quiera hablar?
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great, thank you. So Raquel está aquí y van a hablar. Raquel, por favor.
Ajá. Hola, buenas tardes, Raquel. Mire, si usted quiere hablar y después de unas oraciones, para, y así yo podré traducir su mensaje. Ok. Ok, si quiere comenzar. Sí puedo comenzar.
Sí, no, o sea, escuché la conversación.
She heard the conversation.
Pero no escuché todo.
Oh, que si si ya está lista usted ya puede hablar.
Ajá.
Yo voy a traducir su mensaje.
Oh, ok. Ajá, o sea, la junta esta ¿es para el Hilton de Costa Mesa o para qué hotel?
No, este es el tema de están hablando en la junta, es para la renta de casas de corto plazo. ¿Usted tiene un comentario para...?
I think they hung up because I don't see the number anymore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That is
I don't see the number anymore. Okay, we don't have any other speakers. So at this time, we will close the public comment and move to council member questions. And I am just going to go down the list here. Council member Guinness, then Mar, Mayor Pro Tem Stevens, Councilor Reynolds, and then Council member Chavez.
Okay. First, I want to apologize for joining late. We seem to, I hit the Zoom thing and then got parked in the waiting room for an extended period of time. I'm not sure why, but can we make sure that all works the way it's supposed to? Anyway, I've had a concern about this for a long time that I've mentioned, at least over a year ago. And I know Councilmember Mar has had a longstanding concern on this too. The party houses are part of it, but it's the parking, the trash, the special odors wafting over the fence. There are a lot of things. And where I see this going is about a dozen years ago, a few residents started talking about group homes in their neighborhood, and the council really didn't nip it in the bud. And then we know where that went. We ended up like, group home central in Costa Mesa. And we don't want that to happen with the short-term rentals, particularly party homes. I really appreciated the comments from the United, I forget the name here, but several of us. Unite Here, yes. There were a few of us who started talking to HCD about the short-term rentals and the effect on housing stocks and so forth. We also were folding in group homes, but we didn't get any traction there. But HCD actually has issued an advisory that banning short-term rentals or regulating short-term rentals can be a means of preserving housing stock. And so we could put that in, we should actually be putting that in our housing element. Not talking about renting out a room that may enable someone to stay in a home, but when you have something that becomes permanent, that really does affect our housing stock. And I looked at the ads. We had homes in Costa Mesa that were advertised as great place for a reunion. One even said it was a great place for a bachelor party. And I just thought, oh my gosh, the poor neighbors. There were a few ads like that staff actually looked into, and they were in small lot areas. And so we therefore were able to stop that, because there are CCNRs on many of the small lot projects that prohibit the short-term rentals. And I think we need to look at that more on new housing projects. So that might be part of an ordinance or maybe part of a project. We didn't really talk about the competition with the hotels, because I see somebody who's getting it at both ends. The poor lady who has fewer hours at BBC, and then she's trying to pay her rent. But I have a question about our loud party ordinance. It won't affect our parking problems or putting out the trash early or things. We have an ordinance now for loud parties. If the police are called out, I forget, a couple times, then the property owner is supposed to be fined. I don't know that that would balance out however much money they're making on these short-term rentals. But how have we been applying our loud party ordinance? Has anybody been cited under our loud party ordinance? Or has that tool even been examined?
I can speak to this briefly, and probably Captain Bacala can add to it. We have sent letters, the department has sent letters to some of the property owners, reminding them, advising them that multiple calls can lead to fines. I know that several properties have had these kinds of problems, but Captain Bacala can, I'm sure, give you specifics.
Captain Bacala, do you have anything more to add?
Yes, ma'am. We sent 3 letters to problematic properties, the 2 of them that have been mentioned this evening, to their property owners, informing them of the party ordinance, which is 11-171 of the Costa Mesa Municipal Code. It says what the ramifications are and the owner's responsibility for their properties itself. And now that these letters have been sent to those properties, I think it'll be easier for us to administer these fines as directed by the city manager and the city attorney.
So we have to let them know that our ordinance exists before we enforce it?
Although
Maybe
our
that's
county
the
district
attorney
attorney's
question.
been, you want to answer that, Kim? Sorry.
You know, technically we
answer it,
don't.
okay, I don't care.
Technically we don't, because they are charged with knowledge of the ordinances of the city. But what we're trying to do is be more proactive and making sure the property owners know when we have had these calls that they are skirting the law and that they are going to get fined. We're not waiting until there have been, 10 citations or anything like that. We're trying to nip this in the bud as quickly as possible.
So has anyone actually been cited?
I don't believe so yet. This does seem to be, as Principal Planner Ashabi pointed out, this does seem to be a slightly elevated problem right now and fairly recent in origin based on the complaints that we've received. But we certainly plan to be aggressive as we need to be in order to protect the integrity of these neighborhoods.
Okay, because I know I started asking about the party ordinance, a couple months ago, applying it in these instances. But I would say that the complaints on the party houses are relatively new, although there have actually over the years even been really strange party houses that operated. I see Captain Bacala, he recalls those.
Councilmember Guinness, did you have any other questions?
Yeah,
We have a whole lot of questions.
But people have also complained about the parking issue, people basically monopolizing the parking for the whole block. And in the pictures, I saw cars parked across driveways. Are we citing? Are we towing? How's that going?
We cited 5 vehicles in that particular area.
Okay. And then there was in the presentation, there was a reference to inspections. Why would we be inspecting the units? Looking for bed count or what?
Ms. Lee?
Councilmember
Ms.
Guinness.
Ashabi?
I can address that. Yes. So the inspections would be whatever the regulations are. We have to make sure that, like, for as an example, the bunk beds, that the facilities are in compliance with the ordinance in terms of the bedrooms and the occupancy, maximum occupancy.
Because I would hate
build
to have us start
safety.
doing white glove inspections or something like that. That would be way beyond what we're really equipped to do. And then there was also a reference to a potential increase in calls for service. I would hope that if we had an effective ordinance, calls for service would go down because we wouldn't have the party issue. But why would calls for service go up?
I don't think we indicated that it would necessarily go up, but there needs to be ways. That would be one way of regulating for calls for service. For example, City of Newport Beach, that with the hotline, that kind of takes away the need for the police and code enforcement involvement, because somebody reports a violation and then the property owner has 30 minutes to respond. So in many cases, there's the need for call for service for the police may go down if there are other ways to handle it.
Now we have an ordinance. Whoops, that was weird. We have an ordinance about calls for service from motels. Could that be applied to these in as much as they're a transient occupancy?
I am not aware.
I would have
that.
to, oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, Mrs. Shabby.
It just occurred to me. That's why I just.
Yeah, we would have to look at that, Councilmember Guinness, and we can certainly do that after we've received direction from the council.
Okay, because that's based on number of units and various other factors. So it seems like it would be pretty, you get a couple calls, you're probably over. And so I would like us to look at that.
Any other questions?
And I think, and I'm looking through, I think that's all my questions. But I am like going to once again reiterate with staff that we look at that when we're in our housing element stage too.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Marr.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Do you want just questions or questions and comments now?
Questions and comments.
Okay. So first of all, thanks.
We're not going to vote on anything. We're just giving our comment.
Okay. Sometimes we do another round. So thanks to all of the members of the public who spoke tonight. I really appreciate the feedback we've received on ordinance recommendations, specific nuances. It's been really helpful for me to engage with folks. And I know it's been really frustrating for many of you. So I just want to say thank you for bearing with us. I wish we'd been able to do this 6 months ago, but a few other things got in the way. Also, for those of you who are calling the police, I understand Captain Backel is going to speak a little bit more about what you should do, but generally my recommendation would be, if you have a concern, to continue calling the police, and that is the best option when in doubt. I don't mean for my first question to come off as sort of overly critical, but I'm just wondering from an enforcement perspective, having seen us wrestle for the last 2 years with illegal dispensaries, for example, even if we were to say we banned all short-term rentals tomorrow, what would our process then look like when we got a party house call? How would that enforcement be any different or be the same than essentially what we're able to do right now?
So if we banned them, what would happen? Is that Ms. Barlow or Captain Bacala?
Probably both.
Who wants
Well,
to
it's
take
also probably Ms. Lee, because we would have 3 really essential enforcement fronts, if you will. Obviously, we have the police department with noise calls, with traffic issues, with other kinds of immediate.
But I'm sorry, Ms. Barlow, I'm going to interrupt for just a minute. Her hypothetical assumes that a short-term rental is banned.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that we would initiate code enforcement activity, and we could also initiate public nuisance abatement. There's also always a remedy for neighbors residents in these areas, should it be, for example, something that doesn't come to the attention of the city, that the neighbors could bring a private nuisance action against an operator or somebody who is illegally operating. But once we get notice, we would probably, as I say, we would initiate enforcement on all three fronts: code enforcement, city attorney, including potentially city prosecutor, as well as police department enforcement of immediate urgent matters.
So Councilmember Mar, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think what she's looking for is, what are you going to do on the night that someone calls and says there's a short-term rental on my street and they're banned in the city of Costa Mesa? What happens that night? Not
So my thought is it's basically the same, right? The cops show up and say keep it down, and then they don't, and then maybe they get called back out, and then maybe we send them a letter in a week. Like I think that's the part I'm having a hard time getting my head around, is that I mean, we could ban them, but then what?
Well, I think the difference is that as between right now, where there's a loud party and the police department would send out officers who would say, knock it down, turn it off, whatever. The difference then would be not just that it's a loud party, but that it's actually a prohibited use. And then we assume, and I believe that if the council moved in that direction, the police department would notify code enforcement. Code enforcement would confer with the city attorney, and we would make all necessary steps to stop it from happening as soon as possible.
In Captain Bagala, from an operational perspective, would we handle anything any differently?
We'd be handling it how we are now, Ms. Marv. We'd be going out for the disturbing the peace calls, and then ultimately maybe going out on that municipal code for a party ordinance if there's a repeat call within 30 days of the same location.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things from speaking with some of the homeowners who have been concerned is that it's not just, I was thinking about this in the context of VRBO, Airbnb, but also the notion that there's sort of a workaround through a third party who says, I'll rent out your house to Google workers, and then ends up listing it on Airbnb. And so I'm wondering, does that then, do we also need to include those folks in our ordinance? Because ultimately we don't run around necessarily regulating rental companies. And then two, it seems like that actually opens opportunity for bad behavior, because then the homeowner is not directly involved. And so how do we, this is for the city attorney, so how do we consider that sort of third party intermediate agent?
Ultimately, it doesn't matter how many people are in the chain. The property owner is always responsible for how their own property is operated, whether it's leased or there's a rental company, it doesn't matter. So we would structure any restriction, whether it's regulation or prohibition, we would structure any such rules to ensure that we can have the maximum impact on whoever is renting the property, whoever owns the property, and whoever is whatever the number of middlemen there are in terms of renting it, managing it, etc.
So, I mean, I won't say it now, but there's at least one name that sounds fairly familiar from a couple of these problem homes and from talking to residents over the last 2 years. And so I would want us to, however we went through regulating, I would want us to be able to identify commonalities in that middle party as well, if they become themselves a nuisance.
There may also be an opportunity, Councilmember Mars, we structure our regulatory and permitting scheme to, for example, limit the number of short-term rentals that could be leased by an individual property owner to one. That's another way that some cities have gotten to the issue of multiple property owners or multiple properties owned by the same owner renting in multiple areas of the city. That is one option as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Are we allowed to charge, this might be the city attorney, are we allowed to charge a different TOT potentially for Airbnb or short-term rentals than hotels?
We would have to have a vote of the people to change the tax rate for that other use.
But conceivably, we could carve out a different percentage for short-term rentals.
With a vote of the people, correct.
Okay. And the collection mechanism, would that be through individual property owners or through the short-term rental sites themselves?
It actually doesn't matter as long as they pay, excuse me, the TOT that we currently have on the books, which is 8%. Then it wouldn't matter whether it was paid by the management company or rental company versus the owner.
Well, my thought is just a lot more burdensome for us to worry about collecting from individuals.
It is, but it's truly it's no different than any hotel owner owns a single hotel property in the city. They collect the TOT from everybody that rents from them, and they remit it to us. So it would be exactly the same with any permitted short-term rental.
City manager.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. So while what the city attorney is saying is correct in terms of the individual property owner would still be collecting the tax, through Airbnb, there is the option to actually have the collection happen at the point of the exchange of the rental fee. And so that would be far more administratively efficient. Not to mention, it's also much easier to audit to make sure that the city is actually receiving the TOT that it's entitled to. Whenever you have a honor system or a self-reporting mechanism for any type of tax, there's always the possibility of the city not actually getting its rightful share. And so any administrative efficiency where there's a direct correlation between the rental unit, the amount that's being paid, and that tax calculation that can easily be tracked by dates, by names, et cetera, on a platform that's already used and is widely available, that's always preferable.
Yeah, I think about a year ago, we hired a firm to go help us collect from businesses and entities that weren't paying the fees and taxes that we were entitled to. So I wouldn't want to spend more money doing that for the sake of collecting TOT. Okay, change of subject. On the hotline, Ms. Ashawi, who is administering that if it's not code enforcement or PD? And do we know what kind of success? I mean, it sounds like a good idea and concept that the homeowner would come out in 30 minutes or whatever, but how does that work in practicality?
So I believe that there is a third-party consulting that's doing that, and they charge per call or they're per service. So I don't think it's handled through the city directly.
Okay. And we, I guess if that was something we would want to do, I'd want to understand a little bit better how that worked and what the obligation of what if they don't show up in 2 hours?
I think then they'll be subject to citation or violation. And I think that if they have like consecutive violation, they could lose their permit or something like that.
Got it. Okay. So that's my last question. Just in terms of comments and where my head's at right now, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit torn. I think talking to some of the residents and just the sort of extreme what they've had to deal with over the last 6 months, and I'm inclined to say this doesn't make sense for our city, frankly, and it's more effort than it's worth to try to enforce. We've got other priorities and other things that we should be having code enforcement and PD focus on, frankly. But then on the other hand, if we do that, I worry we're still going to be dealing with the problem. So why not legalize it and regulate it? I love the idea of collecting TOT. That was one of my list of revenue generating things when I came into office, was expanding the collection to include Airbnb or short-term rentals. But I also think the administrative burden of us then managing a very tightly regulated process might also end up costing us in the long run or be a burden. And so, I mean, I think it's one of two ways for me. It's either a ban or it is regulating number of days, number of entities in the city, total number of units in the city, inspecting, collecting taxes, collecting fees to certify and inspect on an annual basis, and really throwing sort of the kitchen sink into this ordinance to make sure we're using every lever we can. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stevens?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of questions. I have more like statements to make based on the information I've received, both in this meeting and outside the meeting. So yeah, I was definitely involved with the issue with the Visalia house. I had 2 meetings, one with the neighbors and Captain Bacala was at both those meetings, and then another one at Wacom Park where the mayor attended. So I'm familiar with the issues there. I have a couple of thoughts about, what the owner, I think it was the owner or the representative of the owner, said to us. I wrote down a note, disingenuous. First of all, I think that 6 to 8 complaints in a month are really high. Like when you think about just kind of take a breather and think, if there were 6 to 8 complaints about one of your neighbors to the city, that would be a serious problem. And the fact that and I don't have any neighbors that I've complained about 6 to 8 times in 20 years, much less in 1 month. And if I did, they'd be off my Christmas card list. Not only that, is the parties, when she said, well, I'm not sure what you do with the parties, and I asked the police officer, what do we do? Well, I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Parties aren't allowed. You're not allowed to have big party houses and raves during, based on the limitations that we have. I mean, it could cause a super spreader at this point in time, and nobody has really addressed that, I don't think. Then you go to the situation on town, and you actually have a shooting, drive-by shooting, return fire. And I want you to put it in perspective, as Councilmember Guinness said, we're kind of like in the bud here, no relation to the smoke that people were complaining about. We're in the bud, right, in terms of the nipping. And yet we have these serious problems, including gunfire. Then you get to, the bud reference, you get to El Camino. I have a really close family friend who complained to me about what's going on there. They back up to the El Camino property. They're in one of the cul-de-sacs there right off of Mission. And so they had that problem. So we have a relatively small population and a disproportionately large amount of serious problems associated with that small population. So I'm persuaded, at least unless I hear something else, with the comments that were made by the representative of Unite, which is to say, just ban them. And yet I'm searching for kind of a countervailing argument. I'm saying, well, wait a minute, that seems too simple. There must be some benefit that the short-term rentals we're going to derive from the short-term rentals. And so we think, well, maybe it's TOT tax. But I look at the numbers, in the staff report, which were actually pretty high. But then I look at all the bullet points of the administrative load that would go onto that number, and I compare it to the comment that was made about the amount of TOT taxes in the short-term rentals are really just cannibalizing from our hotel rooms. Now, in fairness, there is a group of people who may not go to our hotel rooms that would go to a short-term rental, and therefore there is like a little blue ocean that we would be able to capture in terms of revenue. But my instinct tells me that that's really a small amount. I look at what other cities are doing, and I compare those other cities and their geographic location and their history to Costa Mesa. And I see that in the main, the cities that are allowing short-term rentals are coastal cities and cities where they have a tourism built up regarding the coast. And then they're allowing those short-term rentals in the coastal area. Well, we don't have a coast. So then I get to the idea, and this is just by way of direction. I mean, and I will definitely keep an open mind. I get to the idea that why not just ban the short-term rentals and then allow people, because I didn't hear really anyone from Costa Mesa. I listened and I heard the person who spoke from Huntington Beach, but I didn't hear anyone coming up and saying, we really need to have short-term rentals. It's really important. Now, I could create a hypothetical about why a group of residents might really benefit from short-term rentals, but there's no testimony in the record about that. So it would seem to me like that the direction that I think makes sense is to ban them and then allow for that group to kind of come and have those discussions, that engagement with us. And so if there is a group of folks that want to have a limited program that has these, restrictions, then they can come up and have that discussion with us. But the level set is, while we're having that discussion, they're banned. And I've come up with like an analogy. It's not exactly right, but right now we ban beekeepers. You can't keep bees in Costa Mesa. They're banned. So from time to time, my friend Ned Whitmore will come up before the city council and say, we should really look at allowing people to keep bees in Costa Mesa. And I'm totally engaged in that. I'm happy to have a discussion with Ned about bees and why we should keep bees and how it's going to pollinate our community, and it's going to allow for honey to come in and be sold and enjoyed by our community members. But until we come up with a ordinance regarding beekeeping, you can't keep bees in Costa Mesa. So anyway, I think that the beekeeping model is something we should consider for short-term rentals. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Reynolds.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I'll start there. I appreciate Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Stevens' comments. The one area that I feel like is an argument for supporting sort of good behavior short-term rentals, and we certainly need to draw a boundary around that, are the people who I guess we'll say are doing it right? The short-term rentals that we don't hear about. We did get one email directly in response to this study session from Eve Fletcher describing her short-term rental. I know about that because it's in my neighborhood. I know of at least 3 other Costa Mesa residents who run short-term rentals. As far as I know, without complaint. We certainly haven't heard complaints on council, but they all follow the model that Eve Fletcher described in her email. They are all homeowners. They all occupy the home. These are rentals that they are sort of offering, and I think what we described as like the in-home or home sharing model. So very responsible. They're very particular about who they allow to share their home or share in the case of Eve Fletcher, the unit in their backyard. So I'd hate to, in response to very, very serious nuisance concerns that I do think we absolutely need to address, I hate to eliminate an important source of income for current residents who are able to sort of use this model to support their own, possibly their ability to stay in their home if they're doing it responsibly. So, we hear about the complaints, and again, I take them very seriously, and I think we need to figure out how to address those complaints. But I'd be uncomfortable taking any action until we've gone out and really spent time trying to understand where short-term rentals are being used in a positive way by residents of Costa Mesa. I think from what I'm gathering from the feedback we've received here and research I've done on my own, I think that does mean sort of an in-home requirement, probably a maximum person requirement, some kind of regulated model maybe annual review, all those different levers to help make sure that we can make sure homeowners are accountable and really eliminating any nuisance impacts. And I think that's really the issue here. So I've just been thinking, all of the complaints we're hearing, again, serious complaints, we want to figure out how to address them. Those kinds of things could also happen by homeowners, right? We have homeowners who would throw big parties, make a lot of noise, invite a lot of friends over. So I think before we write up a specific ordinance here, I'd want to understand, as Councilmember Marr asked, like what is the different sort of enforcement options, and I'm particularly interested in understanding better sort of enforcement for just the normal nuisance issues, the loud party ordinance, noise, things that we experience now, both from short-term rentals or from just bad neighbors. How would enforcement be different from maybe if we had a permit program for short-term rentals, an unpermitted program, and how would enforcement be different from a ban? I don't know if, Ms. Barlow, maybe that's something you can answer simply. I know enforcement gets complicated really quickly, but what would be the difference between enforcement on a prohibited activity versus like an unpermitted business or short-term rental versus just like a normal homeowner nuisance?
Barlow?
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The answer is not that simple. Let me just give you a kind of an example in a completely different area. Some cities that have gone from not allowing safe and sane fireworks to allowing safe and sane fireworks have discovered that enforcing their rules against illegal fireworks has become more difficult because there are legal fireworks. We could potentially have the same problem in Costa Mesa. I think it would very much depend upon the specifics of the ordinance, including what areas you allow it in, how much you limit it. If you limit it to one room, for example, it might be easier. Neighbors could, would perhaps be able to understand what is and what isn't allowed, and keep us informed at the staff level. But anytime you allow something that requires us to regulate, permit, and monitor, that creates the kind of need that I think Ms. Lee and Mrs. Shabi included in their report in terms of, the staff that is necessary to implement those permitted uses.
So is it easier? What's the difference in sort of level of difficulty in since everyone's been using it, nipping in the bud the nuisances created from short-term rentals if we have a ban or not?
I would say that that with respect to this particular use, it would be easier, I think, than enforcing some of our other prohibitions that we have in our code, because part of the difficulty is how much monetary incentive there is for people to violate the law, right? So if we're talking about short-term rentals, the monetary incentive may be less, say, than illegal marijuana dispensaries where cash gets raked in, on a daily basis. So I can't really equate those two, except to say that just in general, it's typically easier to enforce prohibitions than it is to enforce limited, specific, permitted, and regulated uses. But Ms. Lee probably has some insight on that as well.
I would just add a bit of context perhaps to the conversation. Our existing municipal code outlines essentially an administrative citation operation that our code enforcement staff implements. And essentially our process is when there is a violation of the municipal code, we make contact and we attempt to really reach out early on and address the issue with a notice of violation. It's not a citation. There's no fee at that point. There's no violation fee. But following that, if the violation isn't rectified in a very short period of time, our procedure is to issue a citation once, twice, and then a third time. And after that, it's forwarded to the city attorney's office for follow-up. That's an administrative citation operation, and it's intended to address specifically land use violations, but in some cases, other sections of the municipal code as well. That type of operation is not necessarily going to address sort of the immediate need. When there's an immediate issue, that is when our police department comes into play, and the criminal citations and all of the tools that are available to our police department come into play. When we're talking about outlining a new type of program like this, it's possible that we can take a look at codifying other enforcement options that are a little bit more immediate. And I think that perhaps that's a little bit more of what you're hoping to see and what you're getting to. I think the point is that our existing code is not written for this type of use. It's written for an administrative citation enforcement system. So I think taking council's feedback this evening, we'll connect with the city attorney's office and the city manager's office to look into whether there are other enforcement options that we could codify that would be more effective in addressing this.
I think if I may,
Yeah, okay. Oh.
I believe there's also one other consideration, which is whether right now there is no mention in the ordinance situation, either a hard ban or allowing it through regulation and permitting. Either one will be a stepped up effort from where we are today. And so if you adopt a ban, then we would be enforcing that ban. And so that would mean ideally we're checking Airbnb, VRBO, which could be very intensive, to see who's listing and how, and then reaching out and making sure that those properties aren't being listed on those sites. We'd have to coordinate with all of those sites, and then also with the property owners. That's definitely a different effort than the sort of system that we have in place right now, which is we respond when there's a call for service. And so a ban is stepped up effort, and so that's why there's reference to the increase in resources needed for us to do it effectively. Otherwise, it's a ban just in writing, and we're still just dealing with it on a de facto problem situation basis. And then of course, regulating is also an effort, a separate effort, but there could be revenue to offset some of those costs, but that also has trade-offs as well.
Yeah.
Anything, either codifying regulations either way will be a separate effort for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And yeah, I mean, based on the experiences that we've heard, homeowners, renters, other residents of Costa Mesa dealing with, absolutely interested in pursuing sort of any way to do that sort of stepped up enforcement, any way we can respond more swiftly and more effectively. I don't see any reason we should allow short-term rentals of whole properties or of whole units, like apartment units. I don't see any reason that we should have different rules for single-family, multifamily, mixed-use areas. They're all neighborhoods. And but I am uncomfortable with a full ban, knowing residents of Costa Mesa who live on their properties, who are able to rent out a room on a short-term basis, or rent out a granny unit that they have, as Eve Fletcher, who emailed us, does. If they are not getting complaints, and we're not hearing about them because they're not getting complaints, I'm concerned about removing that source of income that they've been able to create for themselves. So I would want to be really careful about that, and perhaps we can make a concerted effort to collect some information about sort of that part of the market and these more successful uses of short-term rentals. We received some comments about this potential conflict with housing units available in the city. I think that's another reason to not support short-term rentals on whole properties. I don't think a property owner should just be able to buy a home and then use it as a business for short-term rentals. But in the case where a property owner wants to do short-term rentals, again, of a bedroom in their home or of a wing of their home, if they're living in it and not getting complaints, there's no guarantee that that unit would be used as a housing unit elsewhere. I think someone would just live alone otherwise. So I don't think that also addresses the housing situation. So I'm uncomfortable right now with an all-out ban, but I do think the most pressing issue is our enforcement ability on these nuisances that we've heard described. From short-term rentals or otherwise, half the nuisance complaints I get are from homeowners.
Okay.
I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to everyone that spoke today. I know this is a very pressing issue, particularly on County Street, where I know I have multiple complaints. And I think I'll begin my questioning there. So to anyone in staff, doesn't matter who answers it, how many short-term rentals do we have in Costa Mesa, like a rough estimate?
The staff report said about 100.
Okay, I paused because I think that's from one site, but I'll use that for example. So you have one short-term rental in Costa Mesa. How many of them have been giving us excessive problems in the city of Costa Mesa? Like another way to phrase that question is, how many of those properties have more than like 2 complaints?
I'll answer that one. We don't. It's not so much that they have 2 complaints. The police department, if we have problematic properties that we're getting multiple calls on, we have at this time we have 5 that we're addressing.
Okay. And then of those 5 properties, do we know if those are like full home rentals or those like artist said, a lot like a ADU rental? Do we know what those type are?
We don't know as a
Chavez,
Ms. Lee?
From the ones that we are aware of, and we've been working with the police department on identifying those specific nuisance properties, they appear to be mostly whole home rentals.
Okay, thank you. And that's what I thought, and I wanted to begin that part of my comments for a reason. I think what we're experiencing today as a result of, it's like a few bad actors being really, really bad actors. And I think that, to quote Councilmember Reynolds, as we move forward with a policy, we have to understand that the entire market isn't like this. That being said, I do have some concerns I do want to share. I quite frankly am really uncomfortable with the fact that we have such problematic properties in Costa Mesa. And quite frankly, I really don't think an Airbnb or other similar type of facility should be offering full home-term rentals at this moment in time. And let me explain why. A lot of these full home rentals are for the express purpose of partying. How do I know this? Because I have people that are my age or younger who are doing these properties to party. And a couple of things came to my head. Originally I was thinking like, well, what can we do to curtail only the homes that are kind of the issue for short-term rentals? Could we have someone who's over 21 on property? Could we have it be that they only stay for 2 or more days? And as I kind of thought through these like answers, the more and more I realized that it's not really going to be a solution, because what's happening is you have a group of friends who all pitch in money to get a home to party at, and what's happening is they're splitting that cost amongst many people, so it's more affordable. So I don't think us doing any of those measures would actually be effective in solving the problem, because they'll just find a way around it. I actually agree with Mayor Representative Stevens that until we get a concrete solution, I think we should just do a full-on ban of short-term rentals and kind of see how we go from there. Because my first concern and my main concern is the safety of our residents and their quality of life. County Street has gone through so much issues. Governor Street has gone through so much issues. And, just today I'm learning about Visalia Street. Like, these are things that we're noticing a pattern that when a home becomes an Airbnb, the issues aren't small, they're very big. And I want to kind of put a stop on that before we have more properties that are doing the similar kind of damage to our quality of life in Costa Mesa. Furthermore, as you guys know, I'm very pro housing. I always add this question to everyone I talk to when it comes to housing is where are people my age going to live in Costa Mesa? Because I guarantee you we're not leaving the Inland Empire. We like it here. There's good things to do here. We grew up here. And I think just the idea that an entire home is being used up for a short-term rental, that's disrupting the neighborhood, that's ruining quality of life of residents, that to me does not make sense. I would be willing and open to discuss some modifications for short-term rentals on the basis that, you know, the owner is on the property at all times and they're renting out a bedroom. Because at that point, I can't see it being used as a secondary form of income. I'm okay with that. I have friends that do that in Fullerton, that they live in their condo and they have one bedroom they do for Airbnb, and it's quiet because they live in the property. I'm open to having that discussion, but for the time being, until we get more data points, until we get more feedback from our residents, I am okay with doing a complete ban and then adding on or adapting that to see what kind of will work for our city. Because at the end of the day, to me, ultimately, it comes down to one thing. The properties that we're hearing today are really bad actors, and they're seriously ruining our quality of life for our residents, and that just can't be okay.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Chavez. Councilor Mansour.
Thank you. Excuse me. So I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you to all the residents for speaking up tonight and sending emails and so forth. I apologize for all the things you're going through. And my primary concern is, you know, quality of life, peace and quiet in the neighborhoods. You know, quite frankly, probably the easiest way to is just to say no to all of it. And I'm not going to say I'm against that. I can appreciate comments by Councilmember Reynolds about not wanting to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There probably are some good operators, and so I'm open to looking at that. But that being said, quality of life and quiet neighborhoods is the priority, and so whatever it's going to take to get to that. So with that being said, I want to zero in on a couple things. I know Councilmember Reynolds asked about enforcement of different types of property. So I want to preface my questions with a scenario where you have a single family home, owner occupied, you have a rental unit with a 2-year lease, and you have an Airbnb. And on the same night, there's a party in all three different parts of the city, and we get calls for complaints. So I'm trying to understand how each one might be handled differently. And so I'm looking a few pages in on the staff report where it says enforcement and complaints. The second paragraph, it starts out as previously stated, the short-term rentals are not explicitly defined. Then it goes on to talk about a notice of violation. And I know that the term party ordinance was mentioned. Is that just a fancy way of saying our municipal ordinance as opposed to the penal code? I just want to clarify.
Captain Bacala.
There's the penal code, sir, and then disturbing the peace 415, and then there's a municipal code, which it is the party ordinance. It's 11-171.
Okay. So when we use the term party ordinance, we're referring to our municipal code.
When I refer to it as the municipal code.
Okay. I just want to make sure it's not two separate things. Okay. So if we go that route of enforcement, whether it's an Airbnb or a rental or a single family, we get a party and we get there, and what are the parameters you're looking for, Captain Bacala? Is it obviously the hours of operation? Is it after a certain time? Is it the decibel? Because it could be perception. It could be, well, it bothers me, but it doesn't bother this person. So what are you looking for when you get there if we're going to pursue a notice of violation?
Well, we're not going to give a notice of violation from our department. We're going to give them a verbal warning. And then if a citizen wishes to make a citizen's arrest for disturbing the peace, we'll issue a citation. We did that at the Visalia residence twice. If it's the party ordinance, it's spelled out in the municipal code that if 2 calls for a party or disturbance within 30 days, that person is subject to to pay for police services, etc.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, all you're going to do is give a verbal warning. Hey, maybe, you know, turn it down or call it quits for the night. It's only if the citizen wants to make a citizen's arrest, but that's the penal code that you're talking about, not the municipal code.
Correct. That's the immediate thing for the municipal code. That 11-171 we're speaking of, that is for the property owner, and the property owner is subject to that.
Okay, so I understand, you know, the citation, the citizen's arrest, but okay, so you mentioned two calls for service. Is that in the same night, or you said within 30 days? And then you would issue, I'm sorry?
That's spelled out in the municipal code.
Okay, but I just want to understand, that's correct, but you're telling me you're not gonna issue a notice of violation unless there's at least 2 disturbances in a 30-day period that someone has called on, correct?
We're going to work with the city attorney's office to establish any fines, etc., dealing with the municipal code.
Okay, my question is about the notice of violation. What does it take to get a notice of violation? Someone calls in tonight and there's a party after 11 o'clock and it's loud, you give them a warning, and then 2 days later or the next day there's another party. At what point are we going to give them or whether it's the police or the city, at what point is a notice violation going to be given to somebody is my question.
Captain Bakula or Ms.
Through the
Lee,
municipal
can you explain the difference between the notice of violation if we had an ordinance versus what we have now through the police department?
No, I'm talking about right now has nothing to do with whether we allow Airbnb. I'm just talking about right now. There's a disturbance because it says in the staff report.
What's the
notice of violation?
I don't think anyone is understanding, like, what are you trying to get at? What are you trying to get at so that we can understand?
Madam Mayor, I think I might be able to answer the question. Councilmember Mansour, I really think it depends. You know, the officers on the scene have to exercise their discretion based upon the circumstances that they find. I think Captain Bakula has expressed an interest in trying to, you know, crack down on this a little bit. That's why these notices are going out to property owners.
But after what criteria? I get it. I'm fine with the notices. I'm just trying to understand.
Well, under our code, it's more than one violation within 30 days.
Okay, so then a notice of violation could be sent by the city if we've had 2 calls for service.
Verified problems, yes, then we could do that.
What parameters are we using? Is it subjective or is it after 10 o'clock, after 11 o'clock? What are the parameters are there?
I think that's Captain Bakula's bailiwick.
You know, I'd have to look in the municipal code under that section to tell you exactly what the parameters. I believe it's spelled out in the municipal code. Disturbing the peace, as you know, could take place at any time, 24 hours a day. There's no specific time for that, disturbing the peace.
I apologize. Am I still there?
You are here. Well, now you're not. We lost you. Are you there?
Okay, there we are. Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand the parameters of when we would issue a notice of violation. And I'm trying to get to the heart of how easy or how difficult it is to really enforce this, because I think that's a question that's come up from all of us. What teeth do we have? And maybe we have more teeth if we ban it outright, but I'm trying to get an idea of what the teeth are right now, short of someone making a citizen's arrest. A lot of people are reluctant to do that. But I want to find out what kind of teeth our municipal code has. If the police are called out and there's a loud party, does it have to be after 10 o'clock, after 11 o'clock? I get it, there has to be 2 notices before the city will send it out, but what
Captain
parameters are we
Bakula,
using?
can you try to answer the question?
Sir, disturbing the peace can take place at any time during the day. It's a 24-hour cycle. It's whoever's peace is being disturbed. And then if it's a reasonable,
But that's through the,
if it's reasonable to the officer that
but that's through the
responds to the
penal.
call, then
Councilmember Mansour, if you could let him finish, maybe he could answer it completely.
Oh, okay, that's fine. But I'm just saying that's through the penal code. I'm talking about through the municipal code.
Okay, let's let Captain Bakula answer the question, then we'll go to Ms. Lee and maybe she can fill in to satisfy you. They've provided many answers, but I don't even know what you're trying to get to. So I'm not sure what the answer is either. Captain Bakula?
well, I know from a law enforcement perspective, we're going to use the same 415 or the disturbing the peace parameters to enforce this 11-171 as well. It's not spelled out exactly what the decibel level it is.
Okay, so someone calls in and says their peace was disturbed 2 times, and they don't want to press charges. So we're not going with the penal code. They just want a notice.
Okay, we lost him.
Okay,
So,
I can just say, sir, that when we go out to the scene, it's going to be logged, and if the officers know they'll do case notes in their computers, and then we'll be able to review it at a later date and seek guidance from the city attorney's office on that.
Okay, Ms. Lee, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that? Okay, Councilmember
So I
Mansour,
did not.
if you could wait, we're going to have Ms. Lee respond. Ms. Lee, is there anything else you wanted to add?
I'll just add a quick note. I think the primary question here is related to the quote unquote party ordinance. That is something that is specifically enforced by the police department. The notice of violation is more of an administrative citation procedure that has to do more with property maintenance issues or zoning code compliance issues. So if you have a use on your property that you don't have a permit for, you will receive a notice of violation. If you have a property maintenance issue that doesn't comply with code, you'll receive a notice of violation. But under the party ordinance that Captain Bakula is referring to, that is under a different set of procedures that the police department oversees and enforces in the field.
Okay, Councilmember Guinness.
Okay, should we establish?
May I finish?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We didn't know you weren't done. Councilmember Mansour, I don't know if you realize, but we can't really hear you and you keep cutting in and out and leaving the screen. So we didn't know, we didn't do it on purpose.
My screen went away. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. We're not doing it on purpose.
hear
We're
me now?
trying to facilitate answering your questions.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I apologize. I don't know what happened to my screen. My screen went out, so I didn't hear the responses.
Oh dear.
But again, I understand that the police issue, can handle the penal code. And I imagine the police are going to initiate, the notice of violation, but I imagine go to
we
our.
have Ms. Lee repeat what she said. She answered all of these questions. So if you could have her repeat it, because you're
Okay.
now. Ms. Lee?
Sure. Just to the specific question of the notice of violation, the notice of violation specifically relates to our administrative citation procedures, which our code enforcement officers implement. It has to do primarily with property maintenance issues, as well as violations of land use matters. So for example, if you're operating a business that you don't have a permit to operate, you would receive a notice of violation and then follow up from our code enforcement officers. The party ordinance that I think you're referring to is specifically enforced by our police department in the field based on a different set of procedures, and their responses are more immediate than the administrative citation process. So Captain Bakula, I don't know if you can repeat some of the things that you shared earlier.
Councilmember Munster, we'll use the same threshold as we do for disturbing the peace for the party ordinance. Even if the person wants to just call it in and remain anonymous, our officers will respond as we do for all calls, and we will take detailed notes in the computer, and it'll be forever logged. And then we can review those later with the city attorney for legal ramifications.
Okay, Councilman Mansour, did you have any other questions? You're on mute.
Sorry, my screen keeps going in and out. I don't know what's happening. It's a bad connection, but I appreciate that, Captain. It helps me. And Ms. Lee, thank you. So just to clarify then, what parameters do you use? I understand there's some subjective, process. If it's in the afternoon, that's the time we're getting these notices or these calls.
I'm sorry, but it's really hard because it's not just your screen. We can't hear the complete sentence. It just comes in and out. So maybe this is just a study session. Since we're having such technological difficulties, maybe as we move this forward, you can engage with them outside of the meeting. I just don't know how to address it because we can't hear your questions.
Can I try one last question?
That's good.
What parameters are we using, Captain Bacala? I know it's subjective. If someone keeps complaining about loud music at 3 p.m, I'm guessing you're probably not gonna, unless it's super loud, you're not gonna issue a notice of violation. But if it's after 10 o'clock, after 11, it goes till 2 or 3 in the morning, you're gonna be more likely. Do we ever issue those notices of violation for our municipal code for the noise ordinance?
Captain Bacula, can you answer that again?
I don't, to my recollection, I've never done it. I don't believe we have. And we've usually used the penal code. And we've also lately in demonstrations with people with amplified music, we've used the 13-283, and we have a decimal reader that is located in our watch commander's office. We need to use that.
Okay, so that would be, so you do have that available, but it would have to probably be a persistent problem. We usually don't enforce, short of a citizen's arrest. We probably don't use our noise ordinance too much to rein in parties that go on and on.
That's correct. We generally depend on the penal code for that.
Okay. So I'm wondering how much enforcement or teeth are we really going to have if we allow Airbnb? That would be my question then. Is it going to be any different where I think some others mentioned that, hey, we may show up, we may give them a warning, but then the party's over, the people are gone, and then it's next time. What enforcement options do we really have? And then that's my last question. If we do some type of ordinance for Airbnb, either don't allow it or allow it on a very limited basis, what are our real teeth that we have to keep the peace in the neighborhood?
Councilmember Mansour, are you asking what other options other than everything that they've already described?
Well, so we have the penal code, and someone can make a citizen's arrest, but absent a citizen's arrest, my point is, it doesn't seem like our noise ordinance has a lot of teeth and it's very bureaucratic. I just want to understand how we're really going to resolve these problems if we allow Airbnb. That's my question, and whether that's for Ms. Lee or Ms. Barlow, and that's my last question.
Okay, Ms. Lee.
And thank you for everyone's patience. Sorry for my computer going out.
Ms. Lee, so the question is, what I heard anyway, is if we regulate, what enforcement tools will be available? I assume that aren't available now when we don't have any regulation.
Sure. So we have a number of options. I think the important part of the conversation is that depending on what direction we get from council this evening, we would need to do some additional due diligence to really see what options that we have that we could codify within our municipal code that would give us some more teeth, as we've discussed this evening. Some examples from other cities are that they've established a specific violation fee that are specific to short-term rentals. Mrs. Shabi mentioned that $1,000 fine per violation, $1,000 fine per day are some options that other cities have adopted. Some other cities have adopted a misdemeanor violation if the short-term rental ordinance is violated. So these are some ideas that we would need to look into further, that our next steps would be to bring those options back to council and then to codify those options so that we can pursue them.
Could those stronger teeth, so to speak, that you mentioned, higher fines, et cetera, be applied to non-Airbnb, just a party, someone who just has a party all the time, whether it's single family residents or regular rentals? Could stronger teeth be do other cities have a stronger noise ordinance, or could we get a stronger noise ordinance for a higher quality of life here in Costa Mesa?
I think Councilmember Mansour, members of the council, I think we'd have to look at that. We've talked about maybe changing the structure of our noise ordinance in the past. But if you give us the direction, we'll certainly look at that.
I personally would like that. Please bring something, at least an explanation of what we could do. I would appreciate that. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilor Guinness has another question. Then I have Mayor Pro Tem Stevens, and then I would actually like to be able to ask my question. So,
Okay, if we were to either adopt a ban or adopt some sort of regulatory framework for the short-term rentals, what kind of timeframes are we looking at? And does it vary whether we had a ban or a regulatory framework or even a moratorium, which I think would be quicker?
A ban is much faster than regulations, because we would have to be evaluating what kind of regulations, depending on what kind of feedback we might get from members of the public and so on. A moratorium is a temporary solution for land use, and it basically puts a stop to any new uses while we study whether we want to impose regulations or a ban.
So if we wanted a ban, what are we looking at? Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, what are we looking at?
I think that's up to the staff.
Fastest,
so I
worst
think
case,
he's
best
asking
case.
the staff. So what's
That's who I'm asking. I'm not asking the other
I mean, Ms. Lee, yeah.
Okay, Ms. Lee, can you answer that? Like what would be the earliest that you could bring something like that to the council to deliberate and vote on?
We're talking about, sounds like what we're talking about is a fast tracked more along the lines of a moratorium. So,
well, just not necessarily a moratorium, but what she asked about was a ban. What would be the timeline in terms of bringing a ban forward?
so staff would connect with our city manager's office as to the other items that the council has on its agenda for the remainder of the year. But in general, in terms of just time for public notice and other things, my recommendation would be December after the first of the year.
Okay. I would want to point out, and I'm sure Ms. Lee has got this in mind in terms of timing, because it's a zoning or a land use issue, it would have to go to the Planning Commission first.
Okay, so we're looking at several months of misery for the neighbors. Best case, even.
So, Councilmember Guinness, I haven't got a chance to ask my question. So
okay, well then I'll ask. Then I will. Well, then I would like to come back because I have several things here. One of which is I inquired about public nuisance to begin with when I first. This was a few months back. Can we cite these under public nuisance? No, we can't. A police officer can't. There is no such thing as a police officer finding a public nuisance. You need a resident to do that. So we have our large party ordinance. Well, the large party ordinance is if it's a threat to the public peace, health, safety, or general welfare. I'm trying to skip a part. But the police officer at the scene determines that there's a threat to public peace, health, safety, or general welfare. So that does not really imply a resident having to be the citizen's arrestor. So are we saying, was the answer to the question that we would still need a citizen to make a citizen's arrest, or can a police officer just in their judgment make the citations?
Captain Baculak?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, on a municipal code, a police officer can make the independent decision to administer the municipal code as written.
And then I also asked about using our noise ordinance to enforce, and I was told that our police department didn't have any sort of noise meters, but we do have noise meters. Do we have just the one?
Yes, I just purchased it in the last 2 weeks because of the issues going on.
Okay. Okay, so this is a new development because
yeah,
one of my other
it's a fairly new purchase.
Yeah, because when you mentioned it, I was like, well.
So we were listening to you, ma'am. We got one.
Okay, good. And I had also asked about the app for the phones, and I know it's not precise enough if you're trying to cite somebody at 67 decibels instead of 65, but if you're blowing 95 and it's supposed to be 65, would it still not be adequate?
No, ma'am. We're using the a decibel reader that can be calibrated, and it also records the incident.
And then I would also like to, as quickly as possible, get a reading on the calls for service ordinance, because we define lodging establishments. And I don't know, it might take as long to make sure that lodging establishments could include the short-term rentals as it would to change to ban the whole thing. But if we could include lodging establishments within, I mean, if we could include Airbnb within our lodging establishment for the calls for service ordinance, I think it could become quite costly for some of these operators. And I would really like us to see us do that in the interim until we can actually get an ordinance in place. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Stevens, you had something else?
Yeah, I don't have a lot. It's just a lot of the questions that Councilmember Mansour mentioned just got me to thinking, you know, in terms of like the peace and quiet of the neighborhood and comparing and contrasting what we have in these party Airbnb houses from just, you know, people that live in the neighborhood that have parties. I think it's a much different scenario. See, because the people that are having the parties, like at the Visalia house, they don't live there. They don't have any accountability, forgetting about the accountability to the government, to the police department, to code enforcement. They don't have any accountability to their neighbors. Now, like in my neighborhood, we do have some parties and even have some parties with loud music. I've even had live music at my house, and some of you have been to my house for that. But we coordinate with our neighbors. We invite them, and we have the party. And then if somebody complains, we address that, and then we have to engage with them on and on and on and on and on for years and years. I've been there 20 years. I've had 2 live music parties. So the key is, it's not always about enforcement. It's also about compliance. So assume that there's a ban. There's a good amount of people who comply with the rules. And then there's going to be a smaller amount of people, if there's a ban, there's going to be a smaller amount of people that violate the rules, because now the people that are engaging in that conduct aren't violating the rules, apart from the party rules. They're not violating the short-term rental rules because we have no such rules. So if we put those in place, at least the hypothesis would be that there would be fewer people having illegal short-term rentals, therefore fewer parties, therefore fewer problems. Even if there is a problem, you would still have to use some of the same traditional ways to address that particular party. The other thing you would have in terms of teeth, you'd have another violation. And that other violation would be not just the violation associated with the party, but a violation associated with the short-term rental ban. And that violation would run not to the people that were hosting the party, which are going to move, you're going to leave and go back to whatever, Riverside County or whatever the next day. It would go to the owner of the property. So a lot of these issues that we're talking about teeth and enforcement and what do the cops do and so forth and so on, kind of don't take into account compliance and also the social pressure and the social teeth that we have living in a neighborhood as owners of the property, that require us just kind of morally in the main to act in a civil way to our other neighbors.
Okay, thank you. So there's been a lot discussed here on our short-term rental study session. We've gone from short-term rentals to noise ordinance to public nuisance to neighborhood tranquility and camaraderie. So what I think would be helpful is that we get an understanding of what you think we want to do next. What I'm hearing is that at least a majority of us are interested in considering a ban in some capacity, pending a preparation of some regulatory scheme that also has some kind of an enforcement action plan, fines, and a fee schedule for permitting and licensing. At least that's what I kind of heard in so many different ways. And so what I'm interested in terms of a ban, is that we ban non-in-home hosted short-term rentals. And that addresses the issue that Councilmember Reynolds raised. And I don't think that that's an issue that we've seen as a problem anyway. And then that allows us to have a very clear black and white as to all other types of short-term rentals until we can get a regulatory scheme approved. And I do think it's a good time for this. And that is because nobody should be renting these houses and doing parties right now anyway, because we're in COVID and it's not allowed. So there isn't really a good reason to justify, oh, well, somebody needs to rent the house to have a wedding reception because they can't get in a hotel. Well, it's not allowed in the house either. So, so that's, I think that would help us to then take into consideration a lot of the input by the council here tonight, I think, and also by the community. I know that Councilmember Marr and Mayor Pro Tem Stevens and I met with Unite Here with staff. There was some information that they provided. And so we have a lot of information to be able to kind of narrow the issues and make something that's unique to Costa Mesa and addresses the issues that we have here in Costa Mesa, which aren't the same as what are in Newport Beach or San Clemente or some other city. So, I mean, that's kind of what I think would be helpful. And I guess the timing of that is the issue. I don't think that we would want to have to wait until January to consider the ban. The ban would just be something that we would put into place, vote on, if it passes, put it into place before we adopt some regulatory scheme. Ms. Farrell Harrison.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for all the comments this evening. This has been really helpful from both our, our residents and also from all of you. I think we have a couple of paths forward. I agree with the mayor's suggestion to have a short-term and a long-term solution. And so, but I also feel like we need to be clear about the ban and how that will be implemented with the resources that we have currently, so that we don't have an expectation that there won't be one single short-term rental in the entire city because of the number that we have currently. And so I'll speak just from experience in a couple of cities that have had them and allowed them, have not allowed them, but still had them, and they proliferated to a level that couldn't be managed, and then where we are now. So in the grand scheme of things, I think we're still relatively early in our experience here in Costa Mesa with the short-term rental issue. And I think that that's evidenced by the fact that the problems we're having are mostly in the party house arena. So I concur that a home hosting alternative is much more tenable when you're looking at the experience that we've had and the complications that come with entire units being rented. So we can come back with a home hosted scenario that we could eventually regulate and talk about all the different ways that we would differentiate between home hosting to ensure that we don't have entire houses being rented. In the short term though, because of the fact that we have so many that have already come into place, mostly probably home hosted or entire rentals that aren't really creating issues to date, it will be difficult to have a wholesale ban without a lot of resources being put to actually shut those down. And so just wanted to have the conversation about a ban that we can put in place right now, or stricter enforcement between now and the time that we come back to you with the regulatory framework. And so I think that there are still some tools in the toolbox that we might have. And we talked to the city attorney before this study session today to talk about a couple of other alternatives that we might be able to pull the trigger on that would allow us to enforce right now the nuisances, the party houses that are hugely problematic, within the tools that we have today, exploring to see if there's anything that we can do there to expand in the short term to deal with the problem areas while we work on a regulatory framework for home hosting, if you're open to that.
So thank you, Ms. Farrell Harrison. Can I just respond? And I've been really patient tonight, not speaking for this whole time. So I want to just respond because I actually think that if we don't have a clear line, that it's actually going to create more work. Like the way we're handling it right now is more work than if we had a ban and then you just send a letter to all the 100 that we know about saying it's banned in the city. And that I'm not suggesting that then you go about having staff contact every bed and breakfast, Airbnb company or rental, but we send a letter to the ones we have, letting them know they're on notice that it's been banned. Send letters to the third party promoting platforms, letting them know that Costa Mesa does not allow other than in-home hosted short-term rentals. And then if we have a party house come up, we have, I think it's easier to say it's banned in the city. You can't do that. Everyone needs to get out. But if we're doing it like we're doing now, we're just going to be in this gray area where we're having to use all these nuisance tools, and it's actually more work pending us getting some kind of regulatory scheme. I see this being more work, what is being proposed, not less. It feels like if you have a clear black and white, this is banned in the city until we can get a regulatory scheme, it's more work for staff to try to find the lever that we have to pull to address the problem. That seems to be, and I'm not suggesting, like I heard you say earlier, something about putting staff on going and researching all the different platforms and trying to go to every single, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting we know the 100 that are here now. Send a letter to everyone. That's simple. Send a letter to everyone. Send a letter to the platforms that we know are offering the service to allow for hosting in our city, letting them know. And that actually will probably help it because they won't allow them to be on the platform if they know we've banned it in the city. I don't know that that's 100% true, but it's better than what we have now. Okay. And so that's what I would suggest. But I'm just one person here. I actually think what you're proposing is going to create a lot more work. And I do think that the way we're handling it now is a lot of load on staff, and it's frustrating for the residents that live in the neighborhood next to the party house. You know, it's frustrating because I know that every single council member on this dais has been asking for us to address this issue for 2 years. I mean, we started talking about this. I remember on the campaign trail in 2018, we were walking in Mesa del Mar. I think I might have been with Councilmember Mar. And we were talking to some residents that back to the El Camino area that we heard about here tonight. And that house is still a problem to this day. And they're doing all these things that we have currently available, these tools. It's not working. So that's my only concern.
Yeah. I concur the current system is not working for sure. And so it would be a stepping up of the tools that we have at our disposal today or relooking at those. But if we do go forward with the ban as is being requested, then as long as we have, we're all of the same understanding that the expectation is not for there to be not a single one. We will get calls from people that will say, this is still a short-term rental, or there are these listings that are happening in these on these websites. But as long as we understand that what we're trying to get to is stricter enforcement, a better regulation, a framework that makes sense, preserving quality of life, then I think that's doable, as long as there's not an expectation that, we won't have listings, because as much as we'd like to think that it won't continue, even with the ban, it will. That's been my experience, and Airbnb and some of the other platforms will not always comply very easily. And so if you want to go forward with the ban, we'll bring that back, and we'll work with City Attorney's Office and our police department, code enforcement, to figure out existing tools and additional tools that we can implement through the ban, and then work our way to a regulatory framework. But I'm relieved to hear that there's not an expectation that, we're monitoring this to that degree, because that's not possible with the staff we have.
I understand that. And I know we all appreciate that. And I think we just need to, we have a lot of residents who are going to let us know. I don't doubt we will learn. And so I just think that if we had something black and white for staff, it also takes the burden off of staff of, well, we don't have a rule on this, and we're going to try to work with you. This way, it's just clear cut and it's simpler for staff. In the interim, this is like a short-term solution, so we can get through to a, more, I think, comprehensive regulatory scheme. And I know that there's a variety of different thoughts on this dais as to what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. And I just think we need to talk through that a little bit more. Councilmember Reynolds, you also had a question, comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate my interest in the most, I think, quickest and effective enforcement tools for the bad actors who probably won't follow any rules that we set. So I am interested in any ways we've had enforcement issues on, obviously, nuisances nuisances from short-term rentals, nuisances from businesses that are playing loud music at night, nuisances all across the city. And so any ways to more quickly respond to those things that are affecting people's quality of life, absolutely support. I am uncomfortable with a ban on the good actors, the in-home short-term rental providers who may have been doing that for a long time without complaint and may rely on that income. So I'd really like to learn more about those probably 90 plus of the 100 rentals in the city before we take action on that.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was saying, to not ban those. That was my suggestion. But I had a question for either Ms. Lee or Ms. Barlow. So you answered the question about if we wanted to add a TOT to short-term rentals, that would have to go to a vote of the people.
No, let me clarify.
Okay, because you cut out and I didn't hear the whole answer.
I apologize. We can apply our existing TOT to short-term rentals. If we want to have a higher rate, that would have to go to a vote of the people.
Got it. Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because I had a question mark. Could we have a fee that's required, separate and apart from the TOT, a fee that's required for permitting, licensing, and management, essentially?
Certainly, we could have a fee. We, as with all of our fees, we would have to determine, what that cost is, because we can't recover more than our actual costs in doing that. I think any regulatory scheme that we would bring to the Planning Commission and then to the council in the future would address that issue to some extent. And of course, we look at our fees every single year, but absolutely we could do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think that staff feel, I think you understand kind of where we are and how we want to move forward. And I think we can rely on you to huddle up and come up with a plan, right?
Can I just say one more thing? Just one more thing real quick.
All right. I'm trying to get out of here.
I know we are. I want to get out of here too.
I know, but I'm still
Dodger game's over. I want to get out of here.
By myself.
But remember, it's like any problem that we have, we're trying to substantially reduce the problem without any expectation that we're going to completely eliminate the problem, so, and then there's a rational amount of resources that we would apply to this problem, understanding that we have finite resources and many problems to deal with in the city. But I want to be careful here when we talk about the idea that we're going to ban all short-term rentals except for the ones that are hosted. We have to be very careful, and I'm sure we will, and we'll talk about this later, with how that's written, which is why I advocated for a full ban, because, for example, the people in the Visalia house could achieve compliance by simply having a full-time renter there and then allowing people to come in to the Visalia house. That would not be a violation because they would be hosted. Now we could solve for that in our ordinance, but it would be very complex. So I think when we talk about allowing hosted, and we have kind of the image of Eve Fletcher, who I'm sure is a delight. It's not just Eve Fletcher. It could be used as the camel's nose in a tent for a party house, and it could circumvent the ban completely. And so I think we have to be cognizant of that when we're writing this and we're bringing it back. That's the last thing I have to say, I promise.
And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, John. I'm just nervous. Okay, Ms. Farrell Harrison.
Just to be clear, with the home hosting options that some cities have implemented, the owner, it is the owner that has to be on site. And so it's not a renter, it's not a friend, a cousin, it is the actual owner. So we can write the ordinance to require that it's one of the owners that's on site, to eliminate that possibility, or a property management firm or another corporate entity being the host, if you will. And so we would write it so that it's the owner. So just to be clear, are we discussing ban now and then short-term ban for whilst we regulate for home hosting, or are we doing them simultaneously? Ban on everything but.
Can I make a suggestion? If this is conducive to what the council's direction is, because of the time it would take for us to go to the planning commission and then come back to the council with a regular ban, whether it's everything or just the non-resident hosted, it probably makes more sense for us to do a moratorium, which we can bring to the council directly. The moratorium is time limited, but it would give us time to study the issue, look at regulation of the in-home hosted I wanted to say B&Bs, but they're not B&Bs, right? Short-term rentals, so that we could then, bring that in a more orderly way to the planning commission and then to the council to do that kind of regulation. That makes the most sense to me in terms of the time restrictions that we're dealing with. Obviously, once we do a moratorium, we do have to renew it at certain periods of time. But I think that makes the most sense in terms of what it sounds like the council is moving towards.
Okay, council member, that's a good suggestion. Council member Marr?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, like I said, I still think, and based on comments from other council members, I think there's room for the hosted variety, for capping the number in neighborhoods, for charging fees in order to license, and for us narrowing down the definitions of home hosted and exactly the requirements that we would need. But I think while we're figuring that out, a moratorium would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else, does anyone disagree with that? No? Okay. Councilman Reynolds, are you good with that?
Am I on? Yes. I think so. I would really like to engage with some of the residents who do have this. I think because of the pandemic and Ms. Fletcher, who we're using as the example, since she did provide some information, did mention that they've, stopped their renting because of the pandemic. So it may not be a big hit. Again, I'm just concerned about people who do rely on this as their income, who do a good job, and the potential hardships that creates. So I hope in parallel we can make sure we understand sort of that side of the picture. I think that would be an important part of just our understanding and crafting a response.
Okay, I thought that Ms. Fletcher said that she does in-home hosting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're
saying the same thing. We're saying we're going to have a moratorium on everything but in-home. Well, that's what I would
My
like.
understanding is all outright moratorium. I mean, I think I would prefer that just because I don't want to, stop a activity that's not causing problems.
Okay, so that's what
but if it turns out that the in-home hosting or not hosting because of pandemic, then it's not an issue, right? I'd like to learn more about that.
Yeah, and I thought that's what Ms. Barlow was addressing. That's what I understood because that's what I said in my comments. And then I don't know, Ms. Farrell Harrison responded by saying that it's not that somebody just plants somebody there as a renter or a property manager. It has to be the owner. And then that's how you address that. So I don't know. I guess bring it back and we'll vote on it and we'll see where we go. We can't vote on it here tonight, but I mean, my intent was to address anything but in-home hosted short-term rentals. That's my feeling. Others have different feelings. Councilman Reynolds.
I'll just add that's my preference as well. I agree with you. I think if the choice is between no moratorium and 100% moratorium, I'd lean towards sort of the moratorium as a way to respond to the issues of the party houses.
Yeah. Okay, Councilmember Guinness, do you have anything else to share on that?
I would hope that it would be noticed in a way that if the council majority does decide on a blanket moratorium, that we would have the flexibility to do that when the moratorium comes before the council. Because there are issues, for example, number of days, and even without the parties with the owner there are neighborhoods, particularly in the Bird Streets, where it has been an imposition on the neighborhood, even with the owner there, but it's, constant rental. So there are other issues.
Okay, and then I suppose in the meantime, while all this is happening, we just, if Captain Bacala, if you could just, in a nutshell, describe for the residents, much like you did out in that community meeting that Mayor Pro Tem Stevens and I attended, describe for the residents what are some available remedies and options that they have if they are living next door or on the same street as one of these party houses. What can they do?
Well, there's a couple different remedies. The first one, as we spoke before, is that disturbing the peace. If you feel if it's bothering you, not just bothering you because someone's staying there, but if it's bothering you with noise or parking, etc., call the non-emergency number 714-754-5252 and request some police assistance. It could just be a keeping the peace call. If you don't even want to go that route, if you feel that there's a lot of vehicles being parked over the weekend in any neighborhood in the city, you can call 714-754-5290, which is the parking hotline. That line is checked twice daily by our parking enforcement staff, and they'll go out and just go look. And if there's parking violations, etc., they'll take care of them for you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Farrah-Harrison. Did you need anything else from us?
Yes, just to make sure that we're clear and all on the same page, we're bringing forward a moratorium, except for home hosting, but with an option to also ban home hosting if the council so chooses. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
And the alternative, as we like to say.
We never make it easy.
I know. Good discussion, important issues, not always easy to solve, especially on Zoom. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you to our Costa Mesa city staff for all the hard work on this. I know it's a challenge, and thanks to the residents for your patience and your input and your excellent PowerPoint presentations. We really appreciate that. Adds to the discussion and helps us to find solutions. So having said that, we will close until our next meeting, which is next Tuesday. So everyone have